I'm using two phones, so you might just have to manage and bear with me. Also, let me know if you can hear me on the comment section, so that yeah, just let me know if you can hear me in the comment section. All right, all right, all right. I'll be waiting for quite a number of people to join in. I'll be waiting for quite a number of people to join in. I think I think once is once is six, I will just begin. We can hear you. Oh, thank God, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear. The TikTok guys are not saying anything. Maybe I should just focus on Instagram, right? Since TikTok are not responding, maybe I should just focus on Instagram. So good thing is we actually are streaming also on YouTube. So um, you can actually also join in on YouTube, I believe. You should be able to join in on YouTube. So because of our time, I think I'll just start right away. Because of our time, I will start with introducing myself. My name is Gilbert Princewell, and today we'll be discussing FOH versus broadcast mix. Right. So, well, I'll start with introducing Showgear for those of us who are new to Showgear. And Showgear is an audiovisual firm. We do both sales and production, as it were. And I've had the privilege to work on the production side for both the broadcast, FOH, and monitors a number of times. But it turns out that it seems like broadcast is like where everybody wants to throw me to recently, so which is not a bad thing. So I still need to discuss this because I think one of the reasons why we're discussing this is because broadcast has become a challenge in recent times to um, houses of worship, events. Should you stream live? And I've had situations where people mix broadcast from one console, um, and and it doesn't translate as much as they would love it to. So in those cases, it's one of the reasons why we want to discuss today to see how we can maximize all of those things. So what I would first do is I'll first with also put some definitions to things. Then we now start answering some questions. I hope that's fine. I hope that's fine. All right, starting with definitions. So I would like to start off with saying what is now FOH mix. What is the FOH mix? So FOH actually stands for front of house. Um, when someone is called an FOH engineer, it's assumed he's the one mixing for the physical audience, right? So one of the things you know with the FOH is we are dealing with physical audience. Like I wrote in my note here, I said this is the mix heard by the audience in the venue. So you go for a show or it's a church, the physical audience there are the people we are dealing with when we're talking about FOH mixes, right? So another thing about the FOH mix is it's mixed by it's mixed to sound good in the specific acoustics of the room. So if we're looking at a room that has good acoustics, the idea of mixing FOH is to mix to that room. Now this is an interesting conversation because even me, I fall prey of always being locked in on my headphones or in ears while mixing. But the truth is, we're not mixing to ourselves, right? We're mixing to the room. So it's because different rooms, there's this unspoken rule that the walls or the room is the third speaker, right? And so, because of those reflections, there are some things you might have to adjust in your mix. If, for example, 50 hertz is lacking in your room, it means that when you're mixing, you have to push more 50 hertz to compensate for what is lacking. If 4K is a lot in that space, it means you have to drop 4K right, to compensate for the excess, right? So you see you're mixing to the room. So that's one of the things with the FOH. Another thing is, like I said, the engineer considers the room. Also, speaker placement is really important with FOH because how the speakers are placed determine what you get in the room or what will be the experience of the audience in the room. So another thing is the dynamic range is often dynamic range is often wider since it's meant to be a life experience. So um, you're not so bothered as to, yes you are, but um, why the dynamic range is not so much of a big deal is because it's a live event. These PAs are there, they're not directly to your ears. You can almost hear the highest, the loudest and the quietest sound in the room fairly okay. Yeah, so you see things like, at least personally I know, I go to shows and let's say the drummer just rolls, and you hear those tones and like woo, how they jump on you and stuff like that, or the kick when the kick is really tight and sweet hits on you. But then let's say something else like acoustic guitar may not be that the dynamic range for the acoustic guitar may not be a lot. It's still fine, you can manage it. And that's why if you notice when you go back to listen to your stereo mix of FOH, it seems like your dynamics are all over the place. You might have to now introduce a compressor to tame some of those things before sending to your clients, right? So that's because dynamic range are not so much of a big deal when you're talking about broadcast. Effects processing is adjusted based on the room's sound reflection. So if I have a very dry room, I might want to add more reverb, right? If I have a room that is very reflective, I might want to cut down on my reverbs because I want the direct sound to be able to get to my audience. See, these are some of the considerations we make when we're mixing FOH, because again, like I said, we're talking about the people there in the room, the audience, the live audience there. I think one of the last points I wrote here is the loudness level are adjusted for the nature field of the live environment. So if we're in a quiet place or a hall that is really quiet and is well isolated, I may not need to push a lot. And then sometimes even during speech, because everywhere is quiet, you may not need to push a lot, everything is fine. But let's say it's music and things are hitting, you might need to push because you want everything to stand out in the mix. People are also dancing and shouting, right? So you want the PA to always be louder than the audience, the noise. So you see that the loudness is really not consistent because when people are not saying anything, you want to cut down on it so that you don't create fatigue for people over time. And when people are dancing and shouting, you don't want the PA to be at the same level. You want it to be louder so that it responds to the energy of the people in the room. So you see what happens there, the levels, right? Then now switch it over and come to broadcast, and you see how there might be similarities but a few changes here and there. One of the major changes you see starting with is for broadcast. Now we're no longer talking about physical audience. Now you see this is the mix sent to online streams. We're talking about television, maybe a recording. We're talking about Mixlr, YouTube, DSTV, name it. And people are going to be streaming from different kinds of devices. Some people are going to be streaming from their phones. Some people are going to be streaming from their systems. Some people are going to be streaming from their home theaters. Some good phones, some bad phones, earphones, and stuff like that. So you see, this has nothing to do with physical audience. This is online, and this gets interesting. So another thing is it needs to be controlled. Audio like studio like balance, since stream acoustics does not affect the listener. Now you see in this case, when we're talking about live, we're talking about the acoustics of the room. You have to mix to suit the reflections in the room and stuff like that. In this case, there is no reflection. So what you're actually going to be doing is you want to be mixing in a way that it's almost like a studio job. It's almost like it's post-production, as it were. It's almost like it's post-production. So you're trying to get some you're trying to get good audio as much as possible. Sorry, someone's just trying to call my phone. So you're trying to get good audio as much as possible. You want the mix to be great as much as possible. You want it to sound like post production, like a CD record, right? So you're going to be mixing. You're going to be mixing like you're mixing post. So people who would actually have an advantage in this case are people who have post-production experience or might have mixed posts at some point in their life, or all of those kind of things. So because they think like the end listener, they think, okay, what is this guy going to hear? Now remember when we talked about dynamics in the life in situation where that isn't so much of a big deal. Now for broadcast, dynamics is actually a very big deal, right? So I remember when I started mixing broadcasts early years, not a long time actually. When I say early years, it sounds like it's a long time, but it isn't actually. When I started mixing broadcasts, one of the things I noticed is when the music is up, everything, like the loudness, everything is good, it's fine like that, but immediately it becomes speech. Immediately the music just ends and we go to speech. What we just start hearing is the volume is low. The volume is low. Media, take the volume up. Sound now, help us. Sound. I keep getting that. And I was wondering, what is the issue? Like, why? Why are they not? And if you mix for Nigerians, right, like they will call you out. They can even, in a prayer meeting event that you expect everybody to be praying and be soaked in the Holy Ghost, they can call you out and say very nasty things because they feel like you're the enemy of their progress, or you don't want them to be blessed by the ministration and the likes like that. So it worried me for a long time. So what I started doing was, and I think maybe some people do this too, whenever it's speech, I will increase the master to kind of like meet to the point where the guys online start saying, oh, sound is okay now, we'll stop there. And then when music comes up, music now starts distorting, and then I have to now bring it down and stuff like that. So that's what I was doing. But I just felt like, I don't know if you guys do this, but I actually advise everyone to do this. So I usually would go back to go listen to other broadcasts, and I'm like, these guys don't do this, and their broadcast sounds good. Churches like Red Rock Church, I listen to them. I listen to Transformation, Elevation Church, not Elevation Nigeria, the other Elevation, Steve Fortis Church, Bethel, Lakewood, and I'm wondering, these guys, it's so seamless, it's so CD-like. It's almost like they've done service and then it's like the service was last week's service, but they now are posting it this week. So why is it so clean and stuff like that? Dynamics. The dynamics is very important. So you use compression more when you're doing post. So compression and EQ are applied more carefully to ensure clarity on small speakers, headphones, and various playback devices. Another thing you'll notice with broadcast is the ambience microphones are often added to capture audience reaction, making it feel live. Now you see, I feel like if you're doing broadcast, you're mixing broadcast, and you do not have what's popularly known as crowd mics or audience mics, I think you should get one. Now when I say one, I mean like a pair, not one. Why should it be a pair? Because the human ear, we have two ears, right? And our ear is left and right. Our ear is not at the center. So first of all, you shouldn't get one crowd mic. You should have two crowd mics, and they should be, if you're just having two, at least they should be at equidistance in the room. Why is because you want to almost capture, you want to try as much as possible to capture the reaction of the room and also feed it live. Because when pastor says something funny or someone says something funny and people laugh, you want someone who is listening to hear the audience laugh as well. You want them to feel that laughter, as it were, for lack of a better word. Or if they say, repeat this after me, you want to hear the people repeat after you, right? So it's very important. Now I'll say a few things as regards that, because I've also been in scenarios where the crowd mics are way louder than the whole thing, and it does a few things. And I hope I remember to say those things. If I don't, I'll ask you to. I plead with you to call my attention to that. So, crowd mics are a must. I would usually advise you do, if possible, up to 8. If you have the capacity to, do as much as possible. Because when you do more, you will not have to gain up a lot, and then you be able to capture more reactions, because possibly where the crowd mic is, they may be quiet, they may not be so interactive there. So you want to capture different places, so that if the set of, just like in class, when you invest, then people in front are always very quiet, they are focused. Those of us who were behind, we're always the noisemakers. So you want to capture all of those different interactions and make sure that you are giving the people who are listening live the real deal. Alright, so that's why crowd mics are a must. Another point is consistent loudness is important, since different people will listen in different environments. Now, I remember saying this, in the live scenario where I said, when everywhere is quiet, you also want to tone down on things. First of all, you want to reduce feedback, and also you want to tone down on your levels, because people are quiet now, so you don't want people to experience fatigue and all of those things. Then when music comes up or stuffs are, people are shouting, and then you also want to push that level so that the PA always remain louder than the people, right? But now you see in broadcast it's entirely different. The aim is to stay consistent as much as possible. When it's one person speaking, when it's 2 million people speaking, or the band or whatever is happening, the aim is consistency. The aim is to stay consistent. So that brings up a very interesting challenge. Very interesting one, because how do I stay consistent through all of these scenarios, right? But we'll talk about that. And then my last point here is the stereo imaging is usually wider and more detailed than FOH, because it's not limited to room acoustics. So you see, in FOH sometimes we try not to pan things extreme right, extreme left in some scenarios. Why? Because, for example, I pan an electric guitar to the extreme right. It means that people who are the extreme left will not hear the electric guitar, right? If I pan stuff, so usually when you're mixing FOH, while you're panning left and right, you usually want to be close to the center a bit, because you're considering people who are the left hand side, you're considering people who are the right hand side. I'm assuming that's how everybody mixes. It possibly may not be how you mix. Maybe you actually pan all the way. If that's what you do and your people enjoy, then fine. Because again, like I always say, mixing is subjective. I don't think anybody has the best way to mix. So I'm okay with whatever you do, as far as nobody complains. I'm cool. But usually for me, I would not want to pan extreme left, extreme right, because people are listening by the side. So you have someone at the left hand side and the guitar is at the right hand side, and he's seeing on the screen that the guitarist is playing passionately, and he's wondering how far, what's going on, like the guitar is on the other side. And I think it's even more exposed when you are in a small space, in a large space. So you're mixing a large auditorium and you do that kind of pan, it's going to be crazy. Except you have your speaker configuration to have kind of like left right kind of thing. But it depends, right? So like again, I said, there's no hard rule to this thing. It's just the concept is really important and how that plays out. So that being said, I would just like to highlight what I consider as the major differences between FOH mix and broadcast mix, and then I will now address the few things I told us initially that I would like to talk about. I hope you guys took note of those things I said I was going to come back to, because I may not remember to come back to them, to all of them, but yeah. So first thing, environment. So when we're looking at first difference, when we come to environment, what's the environment for FOH? the venue, and the speakers. That's the environment. What is the environment for broadcast? Headphones, TV, online streams. So you see, when it comes to environment, that's the difference. For FOH, is the speakers, is the venue. For broadcast, is headphones, is TVs, is online streaming. Another thing to see, as to take note of, which is one of the differences, is acoustics. What is the difference? For the FOH, is the reflection of the room. The amount of reflection, or maybe how acoustically treated the room is. In broadcast, it's entirely different. It's more it's more controlled, and there are no live room reflections, because you can't tell me you're wearing headphones and you're having reflections, acoustic problem in your ears. At least I believe God did a good work, so we shouldn't be having that, right? So those are the differences when it comes to acoustics. Another difference is dynamics. So when it comes to dynamics in FOH, you see we have a wide range to fit the live experience. The dynamics can be really wide. You can have the loudest point at some point, like I said, maybe during praise worship or music, whatever, and then you can have it low as at some point when it's a speech or stuff like that. So, but what you see when it comes to broadcast, dynamics is different. For dynamics, is controlled for clarity across all devices. In fact, there's a time I was mixing broadcast, right, and because I use an iPhone, so I would just pick my iPhone and just try to hear from speakers to be just sure I could hear something. And then somebody told me that it's the sound is not loud, it's not loud enough. And I was like, why? No offense to Infinix or Techno, but that was what the guy was using. And I noticed that the loudness was different, it wasn't consistent. iPhone is clearer, iPhone has they've done a lot of work with their audio, so you could almost get away with some of those things. And I now noticed that, whoa, it almost looks like I'm mixing for iPhone guys, right? So I had to fix that immediately. Yeah, so the devices, so it has to be very controlled. The levels have to be consistent to a degree that everyone can listen to. Then another thing you look at is ambience microphones. So for FOH, you don't need ambience microphone. In fact, I think if you send your crowd mics back into your FOH mix, you most likely might cause feedback. You might actually have feedback. Yeah. But you see, for broadcast is a compulsory thing. So you see, we already have the audience there in the room, so we don't need audience mic. For broadcast, we don't have the audience, we need the audience mic. It's must, right? So it's must. Somebody's calling somebody and saying they hear, I beg go, please. Infinix might want to sign me tomorrow, so please, no offense to Infinix, I'll just share my thoughts. Maybe it's something they should work on and stuff like that, but I mean no harm. Then lastly, loudness control. So for FOH, adjust to what the venue needs, but broadcast consistent for streaming platforms. So you see, what I just did here was I highlighted the major things. In my opinion, these are just the major things. These are the major things that you have to think of when you're mixing broadcast and mixing FOH. Now, that being said, there are scenarios where it's one person who is mixing, and this is not in my note. Now I'm going off script, right? So one console, and it's really interesting. They're mixing broadcast and FOH from one console. These considerations also have to put in place. So it means that if I'm mixing broadcast and FOH from one console, when I'm sending my crowd mics into my system, I will mute them from going to the left and right, but I will send them to my metrics that is going to the broadcast. You see, now I'm paying attention to that live part. If I'm going to be mixing FOH and broadcast from one console, I would want the metrics that is taking my stuff, my mix to the streams. I will introduce a compressor to it. I'll put a compressor there because I want it to manage the dynamic range. I want to reduce the dynamic range. I don't want the dynamic range to be so far apart. You see what I'm saying there? You see how these ideas now begin to influence the choices that we are making, right? Another thing I would want to do now is I want to look out for all of those what do you call it, mics that are not in use, right? I would want to mute them. Sometimes in live events, when I'm mixing FOH, which because I miss broadcast now, so it's almost a reflex action for both. But I know back then I would not really be bothered when keyboardist stops playing the keyboard. It's fine. And then when they come back to play again, I may not be bothered. But now when I'm mixing broadcast, I'm really bothered. So when everybody stops playing, I would not mute. I try not to mute. I'll just drop the levels. And then when I notice the keyboardist is playing, I'll ride the volume up, baby, because the streaming audience are very sensitive people. All right, it's always sensitive for them. So because once keyboard just jumps out, it may be okay live because but streaming it's crazy. It looks like you committed a sin. So you always want to be very sensitive to all of those things and don't want to surprise people in their homes or their earphones and stuff like that. So now another thing I think is really important is, and I didn't write here, is metering. I think it's really important to have meters when you're mixing broadcasts, right? So this is one thing I usually do whenever I get to church. Whenever I get to church to mix broadcasts, because I mix broadcasts in church. Whenever I get to church to mix broadcasts, first thing I do, and this is interesting, I learned this by suffering. And it's called gain staging. Now, the idea of gain staging, I've always known, was to gain stage to your console, when things come in and stuff like that. Make sure you're getting the right levels and stuff like that. And I did that, and I've always been doing that, but I was always having issues where audio is going to. And one day, it just occurred to me, have you gain staged on the sound card, the OBS guys are going to be using? Have you confirmed your levels there? So now what I do is, because like I said, metering is very important in broadcast. So I already know what's my target for my metering out of my board, right? So I have a target of minus 16 to -8. That's what I'm looking at. So I send a pink noise before anything starts. I send a pink noise to out of my board and make sure that the meter gets to like maybe around because I'm doing -16 to -8, so I'll do like maybe around -12 thereabout. So when I get to -12, I now go to the sound card and then again stage the levels. I want the sound card to not be hitting red but to be close, meaning it's loud enough from there. That is, I'm getting good levels. Then at that point I now go to the OBS or the StreamYard or whatever it is. I make sure that if the levels is already hitting red there, they should bring it down to a particular level where it's not red but it's close to red. Because I noticed that red in vMix and OBS is not clipping. It means it's loud enough. But when it's clipping is when the red stays there. When the red is bouncing, it's okay. But when the red is like that sat down on the throne of grace, it's not moving, then you are clipping. So usually I'd make it be bouncing there, just be bouncing there, because I began to know that that's the sweet spot. So you see, what I've done is I've been gain staging through all the different modules that I use for my live stream, right? So once I have that, and that's why whenever I'm mixing live stream, I prefer to be with the media guys, because no shades to the media team, in my own experience, right? Especially when the power of the Holy Ghost sets in, those guys really don't care as to what levels is going out. I was mixing broadcast one time, and this thing was hitting red that I didn't know. because I felt like I was okay on my side. She removed her headphones and she was lying on the floor. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, we came here to work. You two, you are falling under the anointing. What will, if you are falling under the anointing, you're now making about 1,000 to 2,000, or God knows how many people, 100,000 people lose out of the whole experience because everything is distorting, right? I know it sounds like, oh, and that's why sometimes some, include very spiritual people, would prefer to be in church. They don't want to be in live stream work and all those things because they feel like they're going to be missing out, and they say things like, I came to be blessed. I did not come to be distracted by all this service and all of those things. But the truth is, Bible says, the husbandman shall be the first partaker of the fruit, right? God always rewards. God always rewards. So I take my job seriously because that's service, and know God is using me to bless probably 100,000 people, a lot more. In fact, people would always, if broadcast is fine, people always would believe that the event there was very fine, right? And people may forget how bad the sound was in the event, but if the broadcast is fine, that's what they are going to use as their reference, no matter what you have to say, because they'll be like, he did there and I did online, right? So always very important. So I always check out for those things. I want that level to stay consistent. Once I have that, what that tells me now is, whenever I'm at that level, it means that's it. I know what is going on the ABS. Is the reason why I guest stage that process, right? So you see where guest staging comes in again, which is very important. So once I'm getting that level there, I know that the guest staging, because of my guest staging I've done before the service, it means that point there on the OBS or on the StreamYard or whatever is also fine. So it means that once music is done, because music is where the loudest stuff happen, remember. So once the music is done and I know my music is hitting -8, I know my speech cannot hit -8. So because I've been working between -8 to -16, so once speech starts, or maybe pastor or somewhere, because people who lead prayers, they actually have, they have higher sound pressure than pastors. I don't know why, but they pray with all their energy anyway. So when they hit that, usually they are usually not as loud, or my faders will not be as much. I won't take them as loud as I'll take I'll put pastor's mic, right? So I always look out for, okay, let this guy be hitting a -12, because live stream mixing is not just your ears, the metering. Remember, we are trying to achieve consistency in all streaming platforms. So I'm looking at my meters and making sure I'm hitting that -12. Once I'm hitting that -12, I know nobody will be telling me. And -12, this is relative. This is just my own board I'm talking to you about. So you can set whatever the levels you want to be on your own console. You can set it as low as whatever you want it to be, but you are just making sure that once it's that level, that's what is translating on your live stream, which is important. So whatever you decide works, right? So, but for me, once it's getting to that -12 dB, I know that, yes, nobody can tell me they're not hearing on the live stream. As far as the live stream guys have not, the guys streaming have not touched anything and they left the audio the way I left it, nothing is going to happen, right? And then when pastor comes up again and pastor starts speaking, because I know the prayer guys usually are louder than pastor, so when pastor starts speaking, I begin to write pastor gradually and make sure, because you notice that, I have noticed this over the years, that one pastor comes in immediately after worship, pastor is really, really loud, but immediately everybody has gone down and I said, you cannot take your seats. The title of the message is, it's like their volume just went from all the way here down. So I'm anticipating that there going to be that decline. So I'm already having my hands on my faders and I'm already beginning to push up. Guys, the good thing with live stream is, or mixing broadcast, is you will never have feedback. You will never have feedback. So guest stage your pastor, your pastor is not going to shout. So when you're testing his mic, when you're doing sound check, guest stage his mic to where he is not shout, like getting the point where he's not shouting, just talking normal, but you have good levels, right? And then play with your feeders as a mix and stuff like that. Although also be mindful for, like I said, the beginning of the message where they'll be really loud, because they're also trying to compete with the loudness of the music on stage. So you want to make sure that when he's at that level, he's not clipping, and then when he now starts speaking down, it's not so low. That's what you're trying to achieve. So that you're not adjusting your gain during the service all the time. So I usually would move my faders to always get to that minus 12 thereabouts. And you see, I noticed that because I'm always riding those faders, I never hear people say, I can't hear Pastor, I can't hear this person, because I've been able to achieve some level of consistency through the mix, right? So I'm using my compressors well, and always on my master bus there's always a limiter. I don't care what you have to say, there's always a limiter. Although for me, I would not want my limiter to hit anything above -3 or -6 can be very drastic, but I know I've done that before. But my aim is usually -3, but I have a limiter because things happen, you know. I remember one time I was mixing broadcast and someone was walking behind me and they mistakenly hit my hand. My hand was on the loop elements, right? And as they hit my hand, the loop just went up and I quickly brought it down back. One of the reasons why people notice an increase and they drop, but it wasn't something that would scare you because I had a limiter. So once I know what happened would or most likely would happen is once that loop went all the way up that way, because it's hitting the limiter, it cannot cause that threshold I've set. It cannot cause that threshold I've set. So what it will eventually do is it will dock every other thing. You know what docking effect is? So it will dock every other thing. If you don't know, God will see you through. But you can check Google or ChatGPT. It will dock every other thing, and you will just be hearing the loop for the most part, and you just have to reduce it anyway. And what I do is when I'm mixing broadcast, I make sure that I'm hearing the end, like all the stuff I'm putting on my master bus. I want to hear the end of it. That's what I want to be hearing. I don't want to be hearing what I've mixed before the limiter, before the compressor. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear the end because I want to be sure of what the people online are hearing or listening to. So it depends on the kind of console you have. So if I'm using an M32, I know I most likely, if I'm using an M32 and I'm mixing broadcast, I know I'm not sending my mix to any other person. So on my left and right is where I'll do all of those things, right? But if I know I'm mixing to two different people, obviously I'll do that on my what do you call it, on my metrics. But then again, occasionally I'll go listen to my metrics. If you use a wing, very interesting. I prefer mixing FOH and broadcast from the wing because with the wing it has 4 mains. So if you had to increase something, or if you have to increase something online, like when I have to write past or something on my online mix, I don't necessarily have to do it on the main, but I can go to the main of the live stream and go and increase that, and it will not adjust anything that's happened on my FOH. So you see why sometimes it's good to have good consoles that can do more, because it helps you to make some decisions that you may not be able to make with other stuff. Yeah, so that's where I will end my conversation for everything I have to say about broadcast and FOH. But what I'll now do is, because I remember I on my IG I kind of like put up stuff that people should send in their questions, and I want to use the remaining time to answer those questions that people have sent to me starting from yesterday. So this is from Bright. Bright asked a question. He said, how do you achieve a good mix with all elements of the instrument coming out distinct when you have just one console to mix with? Yeah, like again I say, you have to mix like your mixing posts, right? You have to mix like your mixing posts. So everybody wants to hear everything. I remember one time I mixed in church. The mix was really good. Everyone was like, "Oh, mix was good today. Mix was good today." People just sent messages, "Oh, thank you so much. The mix was really good." And then saxophonist sent me a message and I say, "Alpha, I cannot hear sax online." And I'm like, and to be honest, the sax was muted throughout, and because I just did not remember the sax guys. I won't lie, I did not remember them. And it just reiterated the fact that at the end of the day, everybody wants to be heard, right? So it's always important to bring everything up. Like you want the loudness, the level between your keyboard and your guitar not to be too far apart. You want them not to be too far apart. So that's more balancing. So you have to improve in your balancing. One of the ways to improve in your balancing is just take your multi-tracks, go home and mix with your DAW our advice, do stock plugins. Now the reason why I advise to do stock plugins is because most of these other VSTs that we have, they are really good, but they're not on your board, right? So use stock plugins, because stock plugins almost, in my own opinion, they almost react the way the plugins on your board react. So if you're able to get a very good mix with those stock plugins, you can and learn from the decisions you make, because you know when you're mixing live, you don't have any decision you're making is what is happening that time, right? But when you're mixing post, you get the opportunity to go back and say, okay, no, this bass was not loud enough, this was not loud enough. So look at the decisions that you made while you were mixing that same thing in post, and try to see if you can make those decisions live when you're mixing, right? So I think that's that for that one. This is from Tomide. He said, how do you get a clean broadcast from an X82 or any digital board to streaming platforms, and how can one replicate the FOH mix with stream? Okay, I think I've kind of like answered this when I was talking earlier. It's your ears. You have to learn to mix for broadcast people. And honestly, I always reference my mix. I reference my mix a lot. Anybody who lives with me knows that if I go for any event and I mix broadcast, when I come back home that whole week, I will listen to my mix. I'll go and listen to some mix I consider really good, and I start asking myself, what is the difference? I always do that till now. I always do that every Sunday. I do that. Every Sunday I do that, and whenever I have to, I mix for a gig, I do that. So you have to keep referencing, asking questions, and those decisions you now make when you mix your post on your system. Try and make those decisions live as well. You see that they begin to influence how your mix sounds. This is from Sony Vibes. Your broadcast mix always sounds loud in every device. How do you ensure that throughout a stream? I think I've answered that question, Sony Vibes. So Sony Vibes, if you are streaming, I think I've answered your question, and thanks for that compliment. So you say, how do you mix, Sony Vibes again, how do you mix the drums? How do you mix drums? The drums smack, that is okay, my drums smack and it sounds like post-production. Thank you. But so again, like I said, the decisions you take when you're mixing your posts, try to see if you can take those decisions live. So when I mix posts, right, after working on the drums, I send them to a mix bus, and I process that mix bus as well, put some compression, maybe EQ some things a bit and stuff like that. So, and from how they sound, I'm like, okay, so if this decision kind of like made a difference, then maybe I should think of how I can make that same decision when I'm mixing live. So again, like I said, use stock plugins to do these things. Now, this thing I'm saying is not like this is the way it must happen. This is the way I have, worked and reworked my mixing process, and I have seen that it has made some significant changes for me. So if it doesn't do that for you, then you can chat me up. Yeah. So this is from the Mix Giant. Do you do bus compression for broadcasts? Yes. So you notice that from my conversation, I already started saying you need a compressor to manage those dynamics, those dynamic range. In fact, I know I specifically said I always would put a limiter and stuff like that. So you see, it's important. I do that. Let me see if I have another question from today. Those are questions from yesterday. Let me see if I have any question from today on my timeline. So I have this last one. This is from Kunle Sound Guy. Kunle says, what's your approach to treating BGVs and your approach to reverbs and delays? Now this is interesting. So when I'm mixing, and I do this both for live, but I feel like the principles of sound is the same across board, right? So I don't think like I, I don't think compression live is different from compression. They work the same way, but just how you want to achieve it. So I'm used to always having a mix bus, a an effect bus. So I'm not used to putting effects on the channel, right? I am used to having an effect bus where this is my reverb, this is my delay, this is my that. Just the way X32 is kind of like pre-programmed, right? I'm used to doing that. So when I mix, I always do like a send. So I send to the reverb and it returns, and I listen to that. So, but I always have two reverbs. I have a short reverb, I have a long reverb, and I dial them in based on what I think is important. And I've had scenarios where I've seen people who mix the reverb they have for their BGVs is totally different from the reverb they have for drums, and I think it's fine, but I don't think it's what I will ever do. And the reason is because my own concept is different. I believe that the whole idea is you want everything to sound like they are from the same room. So, because when you use different effects, different reverbs, the BGVs will sound nice, but they'll sound nice from another room. The drums will sound nice, it will sound nice from another room, right? So, at the end of the day, if I am listening, I'm feeling like are the singers from Manchester, the drummer from Poland, and the other instruments from maybe US. Like it just doesn't sit for me. I notice things like that. So, but then again, that's how I do it. That's how I do. Do I put effects on the channels? Yes, but on rare occasions. But usually that's what I do. That's what I do. So what I do is I put my BGVs to a bus, process them on a bus, do anything I want to do to them on a bus, and then to my left and right. Exactly. That's just what I do. Same thing with drums. I just put things in buses, process them, and dish them out. Kind of like it works for me for post, so I think it should work for broadcast. So I want to come here on IG, and I'm seeing messages on IG here. Let me see if I can answer to some of them. Well, let me see. Please, I want to ask, do you compress your left and right? Yes, I do. Destiny say, how do you manage gain staging? Oh, gain sharing. Gain sharing is interesting. So I don't know why Destiny is asking this question, because I and Destiny attend the same church, and this is an interesting issue in church, and Destiny is actually supposed to be the one who manages the gain, and that comes to broadcast and stuff like that. But we usually have this issue because once the main person who is the master increases the gain, it affects both every other person who is on that network, right? So sometimes some people would prefer to have two different stage boxes so that everyone controls their gain. But this is what I believe, and I think this is what we did in church that kind of like sorted that out for the most part. Is we did gain staging for most of the stuff, and we agreed. We had a board meeting. I'm joking, but we actually agreed that, you know what, nobody's going to change this gain, and if anybody's going to change the gain, let it be the guy who's on the master side, right? And he should let us know when he's changing the gain, because I might have increased the trim on my side, which we call digital gain. I might have increased the trim on my side to make my own part work, and when he increases the analog gain, it means my own will increase more. So if he's letting us know, okay, I'm increasing the gain, so all of us are now, as the gain is coming up, we too are dialing it down, right, to make sure that we manage stuff like that. So but I think once you do gain staging from the beginning of the event, you should trust each other and then stay true to the cause. How do you mix the sound in broadcast? How do you mix the sound in the broadcast is very heavy. I'm not sure I can answer this question. I don't understand what you mean. If you can type it again. Okay, somebody said, what churches do you reference your mix to? Lakewood, Red Rocks, Transformation, Elevation, Bethel. Bethel, yeah, Hillsong. These are the churches okay, yes. What do you think of bus to bus processing? Okay, sorry, I think I missed one first, but let me answer the bus to bus processing conversation, right? What do I think of bus to bus processing? To be honest, this bus to bus processing thing is interesting, and I don't have an issue with it. I don't necessarily do it, but I don't have an issue with it now. And I'll tell you just something I think you should consider. Whenever you send a channel to a bus, you introduce some amount of latency. Just have that at the back of your mind. Whenever you send a channel to a bus, you introduce some amount of latency. So it means that whatever you send to that bus will take some time to arrive to the left and right. So they will come late than the ones that are directly to the left and right. So just like saying, I've said that I need a car to move from point A to point B, then I now told the second car to from point A go to point C, then come to point B. It means point A to point B will go faster, arrive on time than this guy. So usually, if you have sent a drum to a bus because you wanted to process it through a bus and stuff like that, the rule of thumb is everything that you're not processing, just send them to a bus, then send them to the left and right, even though you're not processing them, just so that they too can go through that route and arrive at the same time. If they don't arrive at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, what you start having is phase coherence. You are having some phase issues, and you don't want that because it's going to start affecting how your mix sounds. Your mix won't be clear, they won't be in phase, some things will be cancelling out. But to be honest, sometimes you don't notice it. I've done that mistake a number of times as well, and people didn't notice. Depending on how good the console is, it's usually forgivable when it's just one bus. But you know, when you send to a bus, they're not sent to a bus, not sent to a bus, it can start becoming very noticeable. So it's usually something I think you should check out. Somebody say, what church is that? I don't know what you mean by what church is that. So I have one console. Do you advise doing broadcast mix from the board or DAW? Do I advise doing broadcast mix from the board or DAW? Bro, if you can do from the board and you think it will be fine, good. If you can do from DAW and you think it will be fine, good. I don't think anybody will be listening to your live stream and would say, oh, this is a DAW mix, and because of that I'm not going to listen to it. I'll close my system or turn off my TV screens. I don't think. Sometimes you may not even know. So use what works for you. Use what works for you. Somebody say thank God. I don't know what you're thanking God about, but that's good. I have just one. Yeah, I think I've answered that question. What church do you attend? I attend the Church of God. No, this question is tricky. Yeah, I attend church where God is. Yes. Can you tell if it's a DAW mix or a board mix? I'm not sure you can tell. I'd like my team to please share me people's questions on YouTube as well, because I think I've been paying attention to Instagram. So if there are questions on YouTube, I'd like them to just please share with me. So I don't think there's anything like I don't think anyone can. I don't know, but I know mix done in a DAW, because it's kind of like you have the advantage to do a lot of things. So you can almost tell that with the level of precision you're getting, this most likely might be a DAW mix. Especially when you start hearing things like triggers and rest and some other things like that. But why I say it might be difficult to tell now is because now that technology is advancing, we're having people integrate Wave Sound Grid to their boards. Some people even use Emotion LV1. There are even consoles like Loud that does crazy things, right? So you get to that point where you may not be able to tell. If you're comparing a DAW to low budget consoles like Wing, X32 and all those things, yes, you'll be able to tell. When you start comparing them to high-end consoles with good mix engineers, I don't think you will be able to tell. I don't think you'll be able to tell. But if you can, well, kudos. Someday my ears will grow that good, but for now, I don't think so. Yeah. CG, my guy, yes. Good to see you, bro. So I don't think so. I don't know if there are any questions on YouTube. So I really don't think you can. I don't know if anybody has any other question. I think I tried though. I've kept the time. Yeah, but brothers, I think that's like the major difference between mixing FOH and mixing broadcast. I don't think they are too far apart. But if you just pay attention to the differences, the major things I mentioned as regards the difference between what you should expect with broadcast and what you should expect with your what do you call it, with FOH, that would be fine. So I think someone is asking, say, talk on YouTube. Someone says talk more on gain staging channels. I would like this person to explain what they mean by gain staging channels. I should talk more on gain staging channels. That means I really like to say that when you're gain staging your channels, there are lots of materials online to check out gain staging, but you always want to make sure that you have good signal to noise ratio. You want to make sure that your loudest points are not distorting, and then you want to make sure that your quietest points are not too low, right? So just follow the regular gain staging rule, and I think you should be fine. Somebody says your broadcast mix is heavy and sweet. How do you do it? God does it, my brother. God does it. But to be serious, actually, I try as much as possible to make sure that all my levels, gain staging is again very important. I gain stage properly, make sure I get all my levels right. I try not to overdo EQing. I just listen, and my type of mixing, anyone who has actually noticed me mixing, I do subtractive EQing. I just take out what I don't want, right? I don't really do a lot of add this, do that, and again, it's not wrong. It's good if it works for you and if that's what you're trying to achieve. Just not what I would do. I discovered that whenever I take what I don't want, I begin to hear what I want. So yes. Someone on YouTube says, you said on broadcast there is no acoustic issues. What if it's a church that is streaming in a bad acoustic place with your speakers? So when I was referring to the fact that there are no acoustic issues, I mean acoustic issues with the listeners. Like the acoustic issue, if there's an acoustic issue in the church, that's the church challenge, right? So but not the listeners issue. So when I'm talking about acoustic issue, I'm talking about the fact that the headphones they're using are not having any acoustic problems, the whatever they're using are not having acoustic problems, so they don't face acoustic issues. So it means you're still having acoustic issues coming from the church side. Somebody say, please sir, I listened to Aliyah Festival and I want to ask, how did you do your special 3D processing? Was it a plugin, sir? I think even me, I'm not aware of what No, let me be honest, right? Well, it's saying here that I have like 2 minutes to go. Stereo imaging is important, so I try to make sure my stereo imaging is wide as possible. I pan things a lot, so it to give that sense of space, and I make sure that I use my crowd mics. I wanted to say something about crowd mics. I told you guys to remind me, and let me just say this because of our time is running out. Once your crowd mic is too loud, remember your crowd mic is not going to just pick the crowd; it's also going to pick the PA. You actually may also be causing phasing issues with your own mix, right? So the snare that's coming from the PA that jumped into the crowd mic is now going to be phasing with the snare on your own mix as well, so it starts cancelling and stuff like that, so many things. So you always want to make sure that the crowd is not too loud. It's audible, people can hear the crowd, but they are not the reason why we came. Alright, they're just an addition to it. So I don't think I do any 3D processing. Right now we don't have Adobe we don't have Atmos, Dolby Atmos for mixing broadcast, and I don't think we've started doing what do you call it, clang or immersive mixing for broadcast. Maybe somewhere else, but I have not experienced that yet. How can I get great like you, sir? CG, you know, this is a healthy space. I don't want to say something, you know, that, so please let me not cast you. Let me not cast you, please. I will not answer these people. Alright, so are you sure there will still be a phase issue if the bus to bus processing has minimal plugins and sometimes you treat your bus as a DCA? Does that still cause phase issue? So the issue with the issue with the phasing is, yes, plugin is part of it, but like I said, it's just simple. Once you're sending something to a bus, you don't expect it to reach the left and right at the same time what is going directly to the left and right to reach. It's just natural. It doesn't matter. Plugin is like it's carrying load. So imagine it this way. For those people, okay, let me just use, I'm going to, from Nigeria, I'm going to South Africa. I took a plane that is going to South Africa. I took South African Airways. South African Airways will take me directly to South Africa, right? I think my TikTok guys, the same 4 minutes. But yeah, South African Airways will take me directly to South Africa. If I take Ethiopian Airways will first go to Ethiopia. Sometimes I may have to wait over the night or whatever. I have some waiting time before I now go to South Africa. That's what you're doing. So when you send stuff to a bus, that's basically what you're doing. Now, it's not wrong. You should just have your reasons why you're doing that, and you should know what the side effects of those decisions are. So you don't expect somebody who took South African Airways, who's going to South Africa directly, to reach the same time with the other person who took Ethiopian Airways to get to South Africa. It's not possible. No matter how fast the plane is, it's just not possible. The reason why you're not noticing it is because technology has really been improving. We've tried to manage latency as much as possible. However, ladies and gentlemen, it's there. So you just want to try to manage those things. That's just basically what we're saying here. You just want to try to manage those things. Yeah, so time alignment of the audience mic really does help. So what I usually do is, when we're doing a sound check, when nobody sounding like snare, pa. So I'm hearing the direct sound of on my board for the snare. I'm also listening to the sound of the crowd mic, because you know that's a transient point. So what I want to do is I want to now make sure that I time align my crowd mic to meet to make sure that they are at the same level, the same time, they're hitting the same time with my stuff. CG, thanks for that. So it usually does help. Do you sidechain your crowd mics? Sometimes yes, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time up. But thank you so much for the time. Any further questions, you can always drop on our social medias, and you can also chat me up on my own social media. We'll try our best to make sure that this stream is also available on YouTube, because YouTube is live, so we'll try to save that so you can go back to it. And then IG as well. Do well to follow us and be nice to us as much as possible. Thank you very much. I remain Gilbert Princewill, your host for today. Have fun. Have you ended it?